Almighty God, in thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness, has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man. We beseech thee to behold thy abundant favor as thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in this Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interests thou hast committed to our church. All which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Debate continues.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my submission to motion before us. But before I start, Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate you taking the chair. I would also like to congratulate our honorable members in this honorable house, who I think did an excellent job during the elections campaign. Mr. Speaker, I want to extend on behalf of Margaret congratulations to Nyana Stephen, who has just taken the princess title 2020. And I think that is a good thing for Margaret, Mr. Speaker, because last year we won the princess, and this year we win the princess again. And I know in 2 weeks from now, something is going to happen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the government side, they have already presented a strong case in support of this supplementary appropriation. On the other side, Mr. Speaker, the minority raised a number of questions which I believe were adequately answered, Mr. Speaker. And I am confident that at the end of the debate, we will have the entire House in full support of the measures before us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I did not see Tropical Storm Erica, but God blessed my eye, and I was able to witness Hurricane Maria. And what I saw, Mr. Speaker, I saw a country on its knees. I saw a country at ground zero, Mr. Speaker. I saw a country walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But, Mr. Speaker, I also saw a leader, and I saw a team. And no wonder why, Mr. Speaker, we have so many people, genuine, conscientious Dominican, deciding to join this team, Mr. Speaker, because this is a working team, and we are working people, so we join the working team, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the money spent were well spent, Mr. Speaker. And I often hear that the other side claiming that people were paid to be here. But I want to make it clear that when I visited the Honorable Dr. Roosevelt Skerritt, I did not go with a bill, Mr. Speaker. I went with plans, especially for the Marabot constituency. I went with plans. And that is the reason, Mr. Speaker, why we were able to realize the Overgutter Road, a road that has been in a deplorable state for over 40 years. Now you can walk with your proxy, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, on the Overgutter Road. Mr. Speaker, in that plan, we spoke about scholarships for young people, and that too was realized, Mr. Speaker. In that plan, we spoke about the much debated dam bridge, and that too was realized, Mr. Speaker. In that plan, we spoke about the Valley Road, and that is being realized, Mr. Speaker. And in that plan, we spoke about the much talked about Marigot Hospital, and that too, Mr. Speaker, is being realized. Mr. Speaker, after the meeting last night, I went to my office to tidy up some work. And then I went home about after 12. My little boy fell ill. I had to take him to the new Dominica-China Friendship Hospital. It was the very first time, Mr. Speaker, that I got the opportunity to go inside of that facility. And I must say, I really want to commend the government of Dominica for such a facility, Mr. Speaker. When I went there, I didn't want to go home back, especially in the accident and emergency. I thought I was out of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. And that is what we are talking about. I will tell you what I thought more about is to know that in 14 months from now, Mr. Speaker, we are going to have a similar facility in the Marigot constituency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must say that what I really want to do is to encourage the young people of Sam's Gutter, the young people of Overgutter, the young people of Rose Hill, Strat Hill, Four Road, and all the other areas to take advantage of that opportunity for employment, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot have such a facility in our constituency and we do not take advantage of it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must say that every or nearly every regional and international agency claimed in their own words that these expenditures had a positive effect on the overall economy of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. And I want to bring you to ICLAC, United Nations for Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. They have already told us that we are the fastest growing economy in 2019, and we're talking about over 9% in the whole of the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, who in their economic and financial review on page 42, talking about, and here the document, preliminary data, and I quote, preliminary data for the first half of 2019 indicate that economic activity rebounded and that the economy performance improved relative to corresponding period in 2018. Mr. Speaker, this very document also spoke about increase in agriculture. This very document also spoke about increase in manufacturing. And here, yesterday, I heard that nothing is happening or very little is happening in agriculture, Mr. Speaker. This very document, and it wasn't created by this government and Dr. Roosevelt Skerritt. Those are international experts who are telling us that the country is on the right track, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the Human Development Report 2019, we are seeing that Dominica is making improvement in terms of its human development. And all this, Mr. Speaker, is because of the fiscal measures taken by this government, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we're talking about all this happening 2 years after the monster storm, Hurricane Maria, Mr. Speaker. And notwithstanding that, we have CNN. CNN is telling the world that Dominica now is one of the top 5 destinations to visit in 2020. And apart from that, Mr. Speaker, we also have the Vogue magazine telling the world that Dominica is among the top 5 destinations to visit in 2020, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, all these achievements are on the heels of adverse weather conditions, the impact of Brexit negotiations, trade wars between China and the US, and now we have to be faced with the coronavirus. But we cannot just put our hands in the air and say, Pupa God. We have to do something for ourselves, Mr. Speaker. And that is the reason why I am part of this team. Because while we continue to teach people to fish, Mr. Speaker, there are some people we have to give a fish. There are some people we have to give a fish. Because, Mr. Speaker, you know, some of us cannot learn on hungry belly. We have to get something to motivate us, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I think that is what distinguishes the majority from the minority. We have a minority that believes solely in figures. Figures, and of course, nothing wrong to make sure that we have all the figures correct. But it is also very important for people to be preoccupied with the welfare of people, Mr. Speaker. The welfare of people is also very important. And this side believes that people comes first, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I want to commend Ministry of Finance and the staff who continue to do a very, very good job, Mr. Speaker. I also want to commend the people of Marigot who continue to pray for me in these trying times, Mr. Speaker. And I also want to place on record my sincerest gratitude to the Prime Minister and the Dominica Labour Party for having me be a part of this house. Ladies, Mr. Speaker, he didn't have to bring me here because we're talking about 18.3. But the Prime Minister, he recognizes talent. And that's the reason why we see so many young people in this honorable house, including one of the youngest speakers in the whole of the Eastern Caribbean. So with these few words, Mr. Speaker, I would like to put my full support behind the supplementary appropriation. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to conclude on the debate on the supplementary appropriation bill. And by way of introduction, Mr. Speaker, let me congratulate and commend all of the contributors on the government side, Mr. Speaker, for an absolutely brilliant job that you guys did contributing, that the members on the government side did, Mr. Speaker, yesterday in their contributions. Mr. Speaker, young Senator George remind me of Gordon Greenidge and Desmond Haynes of West Indies cricket fame. Mr. Speaker, the senator opened the batting with distinction, Madam Speaker. And when I listened to him and the other young, Mr. Speaker, I listened to him and the other young new parliamentarians who have just joined this honorable house, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I say that the future is bright for the Commonwealth of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. I'm absolutely proud of the job that was done by my colleagues yesterday, and I will go into that when I go into the meat of the presentation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let us set the supplementary appropriation into context. 2 years ago, the worst natural disaster to hit the Western Hemisphere, the worst hurricane known to mankind, totally, absolutely devastated our country. And Mr. Speaker, no matter what side of the political divide you happen to sit on, every single one of us in this country was affected by Hurricane Maria. And we got an opportunity to come into this house and to rise to the occasion as statesmen, not politicians on the political platform, because that has ended and the people have spoken, but to rise to the occasion as statesmen, Mr. Speaker, and to look at the expenditure that had been made, and most of it associated with the recovery process, Mr. Speaker, and to commend the government and the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, for a job well done, no matter what side of the fence that you sat. Because when your house is covered, Mr. Speaker, and you can lie in your bed dry and warm, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter what color you are, Mr. Speaker, whether red or blue or green or yellow, Mr. Speaker. Every single one of us was affected by the hurricane, and every single Dominican benefited from the supplementary appropriation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, look at that. 99% of the supplementary estimate was funded from local funds, Mr. Speaker. That is an economy that's doing well. If there was no other evidence, Mr. Speaker, that we are growing from strength to strength, this fact, Mr. Speaker, $318 million raised from local funds, the government has to be commended, Mr. Speaker. Because in the past, we would come here with supplementary estimates that, Mr. Speaker, monies would be generated from loans and from foreign grants. This here, 99% of the monies used in the supplementary estimates, Mr. Speaker, was generated through our local funds. That is our Dominican money used in the recovery process, and the government must be commended for that great effort, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when I listen to the member for Roseau North speaking about, Mr. Speaker, contractors cannot get jobs. Mr. Speaker, foreign contractors were here from Antigua, from Trinidad, from St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And we couldn't find a plumber or an electrician, Mr. Speaker, that wasn't occupied. If you wanted a mason or carpenter, Mr. Speaker, on your roof, you had to wait for weeks, because every single contractor in this country was occupied for months during the recovery process, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition is the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. He is the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee that can request any document, Mr. Speaker, concerning the finances of this country, of the Ministry of Finance and the persons who work in the Ministry of Finance, like the FS, Mr. Speaker, and they are duty bound to furnish the leader of the opposition with those facts and those figures, Mr. Speaker. But we are not surprised, because before the election, Mr. Speaker, we were asked about the phantom 1.2 billion, Mr. Speaker, where the money gone. Now, we see in the inverse in this new term, Mr. Speaker, where the money come from, Mr. Speaker. That is the nature of the opposition, and we have come to understand that. We heard the leader, the member for Roseau North, Mr. Speaker, talking about persons who were intimidated, persons who were mercilessly targeted, Mr. Speaker. But the facts are known. The facts are known to every single Dominican, and the results of the election shows that the facts are known, Mr. Speaker. Roads were blocked on false premises, Mr. Speaker. The roads in Salisbury were blocked, and the government, Mr. Speaker, in my mind, and the Honorable Prime Minister, exercised extreme patience and constraints in the circumstances, Mr. Speaker. Extreme patience. Mr. Speaker, the opposition said that every Prime Minister and every Minister of National Security should be arrested. Mr. Speaker, the roads were blocked. There were elderly persons from my constituency and other neighboring constituencies like Jubla and Diosh. Mr. Speaker, a 72-year-old elderly man could not access the dialysis services at the Princess Margaret Hospital because the roads were blocked. That elderly man had to be brought to the China Friendship Hospital by boat because the roads were blocked. There were school children, college students who had to miss their exams, Mr. Speaker. But that is the nature of the opposition. We see, that has to stop. We see an opposition who, when I listened to their presentations yesterday, they have come straight from the platform into the house with no change, Mr. Speaker. It's almost like you have not changed your clothes, you have not changed your outlook, you have not changed your mentality. It's the same rhetoric from terms past, Mr. Speaker. Same rhetoric from terms past. And I was happy to see the young Senator George giving the opposition a schooling, because that principle of reaching out to the less fortunate, of feeding the person before you teach them to fish because they're hungry, Mr. Speaker, is a cardinal principle, almost an ideological principle that have separated the government from the opposition from day one, Mr. Speaker, from day one. And we were at pains to tell them over the years, Mr. Speaker, that there are certain vulnerable groups in our society that must be taken care of, Mr. Speaker. These social programs have their place in our society. These social programs, according to Senator George, are actually absolutely essential and important because they are persons among us. But the opposition, they cannot understand that. They cannot identify with it, Mr. Speaker. It's as if, Mr. Speaker, they have a disdain for poor people, Mr. Speaker. But our philosophy here in the Dominican Labour Party and in the government, Mr. Speaker, is to always give a man a help up, Mr. Speaker. That is our philosophy. And we will unapologetically continue in that vein, Mr. Speaker, to help the people of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, why is the opposition so much against the National Employment Program? Why is the opposition so much against the NEP and the other social programs? And I heard the member for Roseau Central quite passionately speaking like a veteran politician in the House when she spoke, and I could readily identify what she's saying. He said, ask the old woman who is at home, who has probably done a little sewing or a little quasi-midwifery throughout the years and helped out in their community. And because she has not worked in the government service and in the government system cannot receive a formal pension. And the Honorable Prime Minister came up with this novel idea of the non-pension grant of $300 for the 70 and over, and you are against that. And she went on again and she asked the single mothers who have to go out every day to fend for themselves and their little ones at home. And yes, I can see Senator Sanford with official expression identifying with what I'm saying now. That is what we on this side are speaking about when we implement those measures. Ask the single mother, ask those in the private sector who benefited from $6 million of this government through the NEP when we helped them to sustain their businesses even after Hurricane Maria. That is what this government has done. That is what the supplementary estimates is all about, Mr. Speaker. Finding the monies in hard times, in difficult times, in post-disaster times, Mr. Speaker, to continue to not only sustain our economy, but to grow the economy, Mr. Speaker, and to create jobs, to create opportunities for persons, Mr. Speaker. That is what we continue to do. And the stipends that we speak about that goes towards the interns under the NEP. Those stipends are administered for the most part by the village councils in our communities. I don't know if the members of the opposition are so far removed from what is happening on the ground that they do not understand that it is the village councils that administer the stipends provided by the government for our interns under the National Employment Program. So I want you to understand that. So when Senator Joseph tells us that the village councils are not involved in the development process, it is the village council and the town councils and urban council in the case of Canefield that administers the stipends that the NEP interns receive on a monthly basis. So they are fully involved, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, under the rapid response, I mean, there are numerous examples. Right now, we are replete with examples of how the rapid response have saved lives of ordinary Dominicans. Ordinary Dominicans who have found themselves facing life-threatening medical emergencies. And had it not been for the good nature of the Honorable Prime Minister and this Dominica Labour Party government, many of our common brothers and sisters would have succumbed and perished, Madam Speaker, had it not been for the rapid response. Planes landing here in the dead of night, the treasury of Dominica being opened at midnight to save lives, Mr. Speaker, because of the rapid response, Mr. Speaker. Urgent and immediate situations that needed to be dealt with right away. That is what the Dominica Labour Party is all about. We believe that the resources that are generated by the state are to be used for the benefit of the people of the state, Mr. Speaker, and we will never apologize for using the resources of the state on the people of Dominica, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is here on record. We have 3 members of the opposition, the elected members, who have been here in past terms. And all of those measures that we are debating today came through this honorable house. There were bills brought here for the National Employment Program. There was a bill brought here for the Rapid Response Agency, Mr. Speaker. And none of the members on the opposition are on record as having supported those initiatives that benefit the people of them. And the people are listening to us. The people are listening, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the people took a decision on the 6th of December, which was in their best interest, Mr. Speaker, to re-elect the Dominica Labour Party to office, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, should I mean, the Senator Masley, I come into this house and learn. Come into this house and observe how things are done, Mr. Speaker. I mean, when you ask, where have we gone wrong, Mr. Speaker? There are people in this country, Honorable Masley, who will never be able to build a house for themselves. There are people in this country who will never be able to go to the financial institutions, the banks, the credit unions, and take a mortgage to build a house. Right? That is how societies are. You have different stratas in society, my brother. Okay? Every society have that. The richest countries in the world, the United States of America, Great Britain, Germany has pockets of poverty, Mr. Speaker, okay? And they have their social programs to benefit the lower stratas in their society. So the government, from time immemorial, the government has a responsibility to provide for the less fortunate, Mr. Speaker. And like I said, that has been the ideological dichotomy and divide between the Dominican Labour Party and the United Workers' Party, because the United Workers' Party cannot identify with the provision of essential services to poor people. I mean, it's on record. It's on record. It was the United Workers' Party between 1995 and 2000 who implemented the hospital user fee. Yes. So that poor people had to pay the hospital before they access medical care. And it is this government, having come into office, who abolished the hospital user fee, Mr. Speaker, and free medical care for those under 18 and those over 60, Mr. Speaker. It's this government who recently, Mr. Speaker, abolished the school fees at the Dominica State College, Mr. Speaker. And we see it in the supplementary. How can you be against children who are bright, young, dynamic citizens of this country being provided with assistance for higher learning? I would have expected that in this new term, that the new members of the opposition would come here and would distinguish themselves and distance themselves and act independently. And when you see things that are to be supported in bills like the supplementary estimate, you stand on your own and you support it. You ran for the elections. There are pockets of people who voted for you, however much you did not win the elections. But you are to stand independently. And when you see something is good, say it is good, Mr. Speaker. You hate the dog, but you have to say his teeth is white, Mr. Speaker. Say it like you see it. This is what is required of politicians at the parliamentary level. Stand on your own and speak for your people. Represent your people. That is what they put us here to do, Mr. Speaker. Every item on the supplementary estimate have been absolutely justified. Mr. Speaker, the member for Salisbury stood up and said, this is the worst that you have seen roads in this country. I mean, you had to say that because after the blockage and the fire in Salisbury, you damaged the roads. You had to say that. But I am happy that Honorable Edwards stood up, the member for the Lapland constituency, and he's boasting now that the roads to the east are the best that they have ever been. You must tour the country, go around the country, and look at the work that the Dominican Labour Party is doing. Thanks to the People's Republic of China, Mr. Speaker, I drive up and down the West Coast every day to and from work. Even last night, after we finished in the house at Minister 12, I was driving home and the solar and wind-powered lights at midnight, Mr. Speaker. How can you say that we have not progressed in this country, Mr. Speaker? 2 years after the worst natural disaster known to man. Mr. Speaker, that is why we have always said, and we will continue to say, that leadership is everything. Leadership at every level, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition is saying that we have a gap in spending. We have a gap in spending, and the government could find $318 million to fund the supplementary estimates, Mr. Speaker. I am absolutely proud of a government who, notwithstanding a gap in spending, could find $318 million of its own monies to help in the recovery process, Mr. Speaker. That is good governance, Mr. Speaker. Monies that have already been spent. Look at the Maricot Hospital on its way. Look at the various health centers that are being built, 12 of them. Look at the Smart Health Center that has already been completed in the Lapland constituency, Mr. Speaker. Every single one of those expenses outlined here in the supplementary estimates are absolutely justified. Hurricane Maria struck Dominica through no fault of the government. Persons lost their jobs because businesses were damaged, businesses closed down. The government could have sat on its hands and said, or hands on our heads, and say, well, the hurricane has struck us. Let us pray and hope that some fairy godfather will come to our assistance. No, the government, through the Honorable Prime Minister, supported 145 people who had lost their jobs, Mr. Speaker. We created employment for them. I heard the senator, I suspect the Senator Joseph might be the champion of agriculture on the opposition side, but you must do your homework before you come. John Finn, sorry, Senator John Finn is the senator who might be championing agriculture, but do your homework before you come to this house. $65 million spent on agriculture. $65 million in the agricultural sector. The Dominican agricultural sector is the strongest agricultural sector in the OECS today, Mr. Speaker. That is what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. Look at the rivers. Look at in every single constituency, there is a river impacting the people's lives. Even in your very constituencies, there are rivers impact in the constituencies in which you live. There are rivers impacting the lives of the people. And we hear them criticizing the foreign help that we got. We have to be careful. We are part of CARICOM. We are part of we are part of free movement. We're part of the CSME, the CARICOM single market and economy. Single market and economy.
2 more minutes.
Mr. Speaker, how much more?
2 more.
Thank you, I can wrap up in that time, Mr. Speaker. So we as leaders, because we are all political leaders, not just us on the government side, but us as politicians, we are ambassadors in this day and age of internet and of television, and everything is broadcast worldwide. We are criticizing our brothers and sisters in the region for coming to our assistance. And everybody in Dominica will tell you the work that Dominica Strong did in the rivers of Dominica, Madam Speaker, is work with monies well spent, Mr. Speaker. And I want to stand here on behalf of the government, Mr. Speaker, and commend all of the foreign contractors who came to Dominica to team up with our local contractors in the recovery process, including, Mr. Speaker, Dominica Strong. So, Mr. Speaker, we are clear. We on this side of the house, we are clear about the items enumerated in the supplementary estimates, in the supplementary appropriation. We commend the Minister of Finance, and I want to commend the government and the officials in the Ministry of Finance who, through very difficult times, could still find, Mr. Speaker, $318 million of local funds to drive the supplementary appropriation. This, in conclusion, tells you about this government. This, in conclusion, tells you about the quality of management being executed in this country today, Mr. Speaker. This, in conjunction with the results of the last election, tells you about the psyche of the Dominican people who understand what good governance is, and that is what we'll continue to enjoy going forward. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I commend all of those who have contributed to the debate, Mr. Speaker, especially the new young parliamentarians who have just joined us. And if this is an indication of what the quality of debate will be through this term of governance, then I feel assured, Mr. Speaker, that we are on the right track. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 41-5,
A member who has spoken on the question may, with the Speaker's permission, again be heard of explanation of some material part of his speech which he claims is misrepresented, and so I'm seeking your permission to do so. But I need to get his permission first.
What's the issue?
So the Minister of Trade stated that I was against the fact that individuals or the government, against the fact that the government intervention towards those who are unable to fend for themselves, and that wasn't correct in his whole analysis of what I said.
That was not the point of his debate. His argument, he was drawing from his own opinion on what he thinks in regards to the different parties' policies and thinking.
Yes,
so it's just an opinion.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but
that's his sentiment.
It misrepresented what I said.
And you see, and
because
yes,
I did, Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I did acknowledge that there are people who won't be able to afford, and I agree to that. My concern is, are we doing the utmost to empower them?
Let me just make an intervention.
Yes, sir.
You see, that is why yesterday I said, when you, especially to the new members in this honorable house, when you come and take your seat, turn off the mic. When you come in the honorable house and you actually give your opinion on how the government is performing and what you think the government approach is, then the government side has the duty and a responsibility to respond, and they themselves, they can give an opinion also. And that is the risk in when you, and I said specifically yesterday, I'm giving you guys leeway, but be careful with it, because you are opening yourself to response. Yes, I mean you tried something, but Honorable Minister, yes.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, by way of helping the young senator, he's new in the House, and I would just like to offer some advice to him. Mr. Speaker, the young senator said, and I quote, "Where have we gone wrong that some people would never be able to build a house?" And I just simply try to respond and to help you to understand that there are some people who will never be able to build a house. Mr. Speaker, you know, so that is what I said. So I was just trying to help the young.
So I think this matter is resolved. Let's continue. This concludes the debate on the supplementary estimates. The supplementary estimates shall now be referred to a committee of supply of the whole House. House is in committee. House resumes. I have to report that the supplementary estimates have passed through the Committee of Supply without amendments. The question is that the estimates for $322,193,115.60 be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020 be read a first time.
Mr. Speaker. Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020 be read a second time.
Second, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020 be read a second time. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The bill will now be read a second time.
Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020 be read a third time and passed accordingly.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020 be read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Supplementary Appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2020.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, the motion before this Honorable House, authorization for a credit facility from the International Development Agency for funding of the Geothermal Risk Mitigation Project. Whereas by virtue of Section 3(1) of the Loans Act, Chapter 64, Section 5 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, amended by Section 4 of the Loans Act Number 4 of 1996, the House of Assembly may, by resolution duly passed, authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow money from approved sources for the purpose of financing general development purposes in any foreign currency. And whereas a sum not exceeding 12,300,000 special drawing rights or 16,200,000 United States dollars, the equivalent to 46,440,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars is required for funding of the Geothermal Risk Mitigation Project. And whereas the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica and the International Development Association have agreed to enter into an agreement whereby the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica will contract a loan facility in the sum of 12,300,000 special drawing rights or 17 million, 200,000 United States dollars, the equivalent to $46,440,000. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3(1) of the Loans Act, Chapter 64, Section 5 of the 1990 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, amended by Section 4 of the Loans Act of 1996, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow by means of loan a sum not exceeding 12,300,000 special drawing rights or 17,200,000 United States dollars, or the equivalent to 46,440,000 from the International Development Association on the following terms: service charge 0.75% per annum, a commitment charge of 0.5% per annum, repayment 60 semi-annual payments commencing May 15, 2030, a grace period of 10 years.
Seconded, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, one of the most strategic projects of this government is the Geothermal Development Project. When the government initiated this project, the primary objective was to develop a source of energy which will allow electricity to be generated at a much lower cost. The project was intended to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels, an action that is fully consistent with the goal of making Dominica the first climate resilient nation in the world. The government has received much support from the international community in pursuing the development of geothermal energy. That support has come in several forms at various stages of the project, such as technical assistance from the World Bank, the Government of New Zealand, the Clinton Climate Initiative, and financing as provided from grants from the Government of the United Kingdom, the European Union, and the Agency for French Development. The resolution before the Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, seeks parliamentary approval for a credit facility from the World Bank in a sum not exceeding 12,300,000 special drawing rights, or the equivalent to 17 million US 200,000, the equivalent to 446,440,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars from the International Development Association. The terms of this facility are as follows: a service charge of 0.75% per annum, a commitment charge of 0.5% per annum, repayment 60 semi-annual payments commencing May 15, 2030, and a grace period of 10 years. Mr. Speaker, 17.2 million credit from the World Bank will be used in conjunction with US 9.9 million from the Clean Climate Technology Fund, 10 million US dollars from grant from the United Kingdom's Department of International Development, and a grant of 2 million US dollars from the Small Island Development States, SIDSDOC. Mr. Speaker, the Dominica Geothermal Development Company continues to make progress towards the construction of a domestic geothermal plant. A flow test was recently conducted on the production well at Loda. This is the first time since June 2014 that the test was conducted, and this well has shown the potential enough to feed a 7-megawatt power plant. The Dominica Geothermal Development Company has initiated the World Bank guided tender process for engineering, procurement, and construction services for this geothermal plant. 3 bids were received, and the Dominica Geothermal Development Company is in the process of evaluating the results of the bid evaluation committee in order to make a recommendation on the next steps to the government. In addition, all agreements, including a concession agreement between the government and the Dominica Geothermal Development Company, the power purchase agreement negotiated between the Dominica Geothermal Development Company and DOMLEC has been signed. In fact, Madam Speaker, the approval of this resolution is the only outstanding condition precedent for the disbursement which has not been complete. We eagerly await the start of construction on this important project. Mr. Speaker, I commend the motion for the authorization of the credit facility of $17,200,000 or the equivalent to $46,440,000 for the Geothermal development project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is before the House for debate.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a short intervention on the debate on this present bill before the House. Mr. Speaker, in support of the motion before the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill before the House, this resolution before the House, authorization for a credit facility from the International Development Association, Mr. Speaker, is another opportunity and another example for us to be statesmen here in this House and to support an initiative and a project which is really in the national interest for the good of the nation, Mr. Speaker. And this bill really should not, and I'm really hoping that this bill really should not attract any controversy, because it is well known throughout the length and breadth of this country that this government has to date successfully pursued the development of geothermal energy in Dominica. And all of us who have electricity bills at our homes, Mr. Speaker, knows the prices that we pay for electricity now at our homes. And none of us have any control over the price of electricity now. Why? Because electricity in Dominica is generated from fossil fuel, generated from oil. And oil is controlled on the world market. And sometimes the price goes up and you have to pay more, sometimes the price goes down. And we have a pass-through method in Dominica where the electricity company, Mr. Speaker, passes the price on to the consumer. So when the price of oil is high, our light bills, our fuel surcharge, as it is called, and I'm no engineer and I'm no mathematician, I'm just a local village politician, Mr. Speaker. And maybe those who are more along the engineering and mathematical lines on this side of the House or in this House in general might want to expand on that. But really, what I want to say is, none of us have no control over our electricity bills. But this initiative falls squarely in line with making Dominica the first climate resilient country in the world. This new dynamic Dominica, which we are creating, and we are asking all of the citizens of Dominica, including the members of the opposition, to join us in that noble cause. Join us in that journey, Mr. Speaker, so that in a couple of years, I would say, maybe even before 2030, when it is the time that we have to start paying that loan, we would have developed the plant and we would have started generating revenue from the plant. Because we're speaking about the small plant now, and what this small plant will do is it will give us a cheaper, more reliable source of energy than we have now. So that is one. That is a small plant which will generate, according to what the minister has just told us, will generate about 7 megawatts of electricity. And if my memory serves me right, we probably burn in peak time between 12 and 15 megawatts in Dominica. So that might be about half of our capacity could be generated from a cheaper, more reliable source of energy. So we should all be encouraged. We should really be jumping up, hooray, in this House today because of that bill, Mr. Speaker. And I would say by the time that this loan
by the time we get ready to start repaying the loan in 10 years, we would have already built the small plant. And the ultimate goal and the vision of the government and of the Prime Minister is to be able to construct the bigger plant, the bigger geothermal plant, which in the long run will allow us to be able to sell power to the neighboring islands, Mr. Speaker. And I believe our geothermal development program is in a very advanced stage, perhaps the most advanced of all of the geothermal programs in our region, in the OACS and CARICOM. So this is not a bill for us to find any controversy in. I mean, if in hard times we could find 318 million, like we just said, of local funds to put into the supplementary appropriation, which we have just debated, that should tell us that this government and this leadership is well capable of not only continuing to generate the funds that we need for the geothermal development program, but will manage the program and the overall economy in such a way that when this loan becomes payable, and of course this government will still be in power by then, because I don't see any opposition wiping out 18 seats in one term. So by 2030, it is anticipated that this government will still be there, at which time we will be in a great fiscal position to be able to repay that loan. So I think all of the signs lead to the fact that we can approve this loan for many reasons which I have enunciated here this morning. And it is remarkable that all of the international organizations, not only governments, we have the EU with us on the program. We have the United Kingdom supporting us on the program. Of course, we must say thank you to the French. The French have always been, the French government has always been on board with us from day one, from the time we decided to start investigating the potential, the geothermal potential in the Roseau Valley area. The French government, through their departments of Martinique and Guadeloupe, have been involved with us, and they continue to show their commitment going forward. So I'm absolutely confident that we are on the right track for many reasons with this geothermal development program. And I mean, you know, I hesitate sometimes when I go back in history, but I like going back in history. You know, now we're working with Dominica Electricity Services, and really, I mean, Domlec really should have been a company of the government. We should have been directing Domlec right now as being owned by the government of Dominica. Right now we have to go to the table and negotiate with Domlec, because the United Workers Party sold the company when they were in power, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we have to be, but thank God that the company is working with us. They understand the importance of the geothermal development program. They are partners with us, and they have even intimated to us that they would be willing to come on board and run the plant once we have constructed it and it's up and running. So we have buy-in from all of the important stakeholders and players in this new geothermal development thrust that we are on. And we are asking the opposition now to join us in this noble cause and support us as we continue to bring true sustainable development, building the first climate resilient country in the world in this new dynamic Dominica. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise to make a very short intervention. First of all, to lend my support to the motion, for the contracting of a loan of some $46,440,000 from the International Development Association on extraordinary terms. We have, for example, Mr. Speaker, as indicated by Honorable Grant, the Minister for Agriculture and the Blue Economy, that we have a grace period of 10 years. So we won't see commencement of payments not until May 15, 2030. And this would give tremendous of space to allow the geothermal project and the company to deal with teething issues and challenges which they will experience. And of course, once there are savings, then these savings are automatically passed on to the consumers. So this will also allow for the cheaper selling of the energy to the consumers. So I want to thank the World Bank and of course the International Development Association for their continued partnership with Dominica. They have been extraordinary, Mr. Speaker, with reaching out to us as we seek to deliver many challenges. And one of our main challenges in this country is in respect of the sheer cost of energy in Dominica. And if we're to grow this economy in the manner in which all of us would like to see it grow, we have to address the cost of energy. And the question is, how do you go about doing this? Obviously, we have to address the issue of the importation of fossil fuels. We're not a net producer of fossil fuel, we are a net consumer of it. And then you have to import it, you import inflation along with it. These prices on the international market, I mean, you saw with regards to just a small skirmish between the United States and Iran recently, that immediately caused the price of energy to go up. You saw the bombing of the facilities in Saudi Arabia, and immediately the price went up. And so you will always have the challenges there in terms of supply and the reliability of supply, but also the inconsistencies in respect to the price on the international market. And of course, one also appreciates the attendant negatives with the use of fossil fuel, oil spills, and the impact of energy, on the environment, and ecosystems. And if we can move towards using more of our own natural God-given resources, then I believe that it would certainly lend to the long-term benefits of to our consumers. Now, I want the country to appreciate the amount of funds that this government has expended thus far in this project. It has been a significant fund because when you talk about geothermal, companies will not want to engage themselves in the risk aspect of it. So all of the studies and investigations and testing had to be done by the government. The similar situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who are now pursuing geothermal. The government of St. Vincent has had to spend its funds to do the exploration and the studies, and then it's partnering with a private sector entity to get this going. So I think we need to recognize the benefits of it. Obviously, we will continue with geothermal. We'll continue with hydro energy. We're not going to do away with hydro energy, and I'm hoping that we can even speak more with DOMLEC to see how we can modernize the hydro facility to make it more efficient and to also be able to generate more energy from the hydro capacities and capabilities of Dominica. And of course, individual households and companies are making use of the sun to generate energy. And I think too that even DOMLEC itself has to refashion its own business model in terms of its own viability, because more and more people are moving towards the use of independent solar systems. And how do we get that excess energy onto the grid and to other consumers? And so the individual, and maybe very well DOMLEC may want to underwrite the capital investments for private consumers, and so they will be able to manage those private facilities and then get its repayment through the excess energy generated from the solar panels. and passing to the national grid. So there are different ways I think that we have to start looking at this, because this is an evolving effort that no one can stop. We may all have different perspectives of how it should be done and when it should be done, but there is a movement, a global movement towards the use of renewable energy. And I believe that we in Dominica and indeed the wider Caribbean certainly need to be part of this. I also want to place on public record our gratitude to the government of the United Kingdom through DFID. The government of the United Kingdom has been an extraordinary partner in this geothermal project, where they provided in excess of $10 million as a grant to this initiative. And so I want to thank them for this. And they've been at our aid on a number of things, a number of very critical interventions. They committed £25 million to our water system, to modernize the water system, to make it more resilient. They have committed £25 million to the Loubaix Grand Bay Bacatel Road, and are hoping very soon we go to tender for this particular project. And a number of other areas that the British government has been steadfast partners in Dominica. They no longer being a member of the European Union, we believe that there may be even great opportunities with them on a bilateral basis. And I'm hoping that very soon CARICOM can finalize a trade agreement with the UK going forward in its own independent situation now, having left the European Union. So we recognize the government of the United Kingdom for this. The government of New Zealand, they have provided us with tremendous technical support. They have a vast reservoir of expertise and knowledge where geothermal is concerned, and we have been able to benefit from them. They've really been holding our hands over these years, and I want to place our gratitude to this. The government of the French Republic, through the Agence Française de Développement, they have also been very strong partners. They provided us with some grants over a period of time to advance certain elements of this project. I remember being at the headquarters in Paris, negotiating with them over a couple of days on this geothermal, and they have been really exceptional in assisting us to better understand this whole geothermal project. The Clinton Climate Initiative, President Clinton and the Clinton Climate Initiative, while they did not give us money in terms of cash, the extent of the making available experts available to us amounted to the millions. And these are the people who assisted us with putting all of the necessary documents together. They help us with negotiations with different partners, help us with negotiation with Dominic, serve as our advisors. There was a law firm from the US that was engaged, and really beneficial advice and support that we received from President Clinton through the Clinton Climate Initiative. And of course the European Union, who continues to be an extraordinary development partner. They have a stake in this, meaning they have made some contributions to us in advancing this geothermal project. And the small island developing states, the SIDS-DOC initiative, which Ambassador Henderson was a major initiator and who served as chairman of this entity for an extended period of time. They provided us with both technical and financial support, and we place on public record our gratitude. As has been indicated, we have gone to tender for the geothermal plant. As far as I've been told, because this process is not overseen directly by the government, because there are certain procurement processes which are followed, and therefore I am not at liberty to speak to the details in any way about this. But all I can say at this stage, and of course at the appropriate time, I will be in a position to give more information on this once it comes to me officially. But we have gone to tender. The 3 companies have been advised, have responded and submitted bids. Those bids are being evaluated as we speak. Once a recommendation would come to the government for its consideration, then I would be in a position to so advise and so forth. But again, I want to place on record our gratitude, Mr. Speaker, to all of these partners, all of these players, DOMLEC. You know, they've been very helpful, very conscientious, and very accepting of the fact that we need to partner in this to allow for this to happen, and we just continue to pray that we can get to the point where we can actually benefit from the resources. There'll be some who will say that we've been talking about this for some time. I agree, but these things require a lot of intricate discussions. There are a lot of considerations. There are a number of different factors. The cost is also one, and there are times you have to rationalize the amount of money that you would have to invest in this from time to time. But I think we are seeing the light at the end of what has been a very long tunnel. But again, we have to understand and appreciate the benefits, the potential benefits to every single citizen of this country, and the hotels. Because when you have a hotel, I mean, you have to keep the AC on 24/7, you know, and guests, once they know they're paying, I mean, doors open, windows open, AC on, you know. And so the cost of energy is a huge factor in operating any business these days, because I mean, you have a little store in town, people do not want to come in a store and they're sweating, they want an AC, and so every time you open the door, it is adding to your bill. So every enterprise recognizes that. You know, even at our party's headquarters, I had to take away the remote controls for the AC units because I'm seeing the light bill up, you know. You know, so everybody is mindful of this. This is why many people have gone through the pay-as-you-go, so they can better manage how much they spend each month. But when the budgeted amount for the month finish, I mean, you have to you have to get some ice from the neighbor to drink a squash. So people are mindful of the cost of energy. Every consumer is mindful of the cost of energy. But where you import fossil fuel, there's really nothing much you can do, except the companies will have to be a little bit more circumspect and to minimize on wastage, management wastage, etc., so that those savings can be passed into consumers and not allow, you know, poor management or lack of diligence to cause the operating cost to increase, and then they pass on to the consumers. And I'm not saying that DOMLEC is doing that. I'm just saying that these are some of the things that one will have to pay attention to. So I think we have, with these resources, we have completed the funds required for the plant. Now, as anyone would know, you may have what they call in-house estimates based on what the engineers and the quantity surveyors would advise would be the cost of it. But when you go to tender, you may either end up being lower than the in-house estimates or higher than the in-house estimates. You understand? And this will allow now for, based on the procurement rules of these partners, how do you proceed with this? How do you proceed with this? In terms of negotiations, and to see how close one can get to the in-house estimates as possible. So these are things that we have no control over in terms of what will these contractors or these firms come back with in terms of what they believe it would cost to construct this facility. Because one has to appreciate that this terrain in our country is not easy. This is not flat. I mean, when you take some pipes from Loader and you get it down into water vapor, I mean, this is not a flat track or even a straight one. So they're talking about the hills and valleys, mountains, and all of these things have to be taken into consideration, Mr. Speaker. So I just wanted to make this very short contribution and to place on record the government's gratitude to all of its partners. And Mr. Speaker, there's so many different partners that have been involved in this, and I wish to apologize to anyone who I would have left out in recognizing, but we thank everybody who has played their part, one way or the other, to take us thus far. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to make a small intervention on the motion before the House. Mr. Speaker, in the Prime Minister's closing argument, he mentioned something I wanted to raise on the issue. We started the process in 2013, and I remember clearly when we came into the House, we made some suggestions in terms of short-term alternative routes you can take in terms of alternative energy. And that was debated in this House, and I can repeat some of them: solar energy, wind, mini hydro. Yesterday we spoke a lot about our different rivers and where we can have mini hydro plants to cut down on the use of fossil fuel. That was not taken into consideration. 7 years later, I am not against any form of reducing the expenses on the local consumers in terms of energies and whatnot. But what we are saying, if we had some short-term plan to cushion the issue that we have. We have enough land in Dominica for the Minister of Trade earlier on, when he made his presentation, he made mention of the wind and solar street lights that we have on the West Coast, as an example. So what we're saying, we could have some solar farms, solar panels. We have companies, local companies, providing that around the island. We have built several government buildings over the years, and we could have solar panels on these buildings to help reduce costs. And I'm just saying that we could have some short-term alternatives as we look forward to geothermal, where we are spending a lot to get it done. And so far, you said we've seen light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping that light will be very bright for the Dominican consumers in terms of electricity bills. It is important as citizens, as Dominicans, that we look at what is best for our people. We can come to Parliament and say, what is fancy and all is nice, but I think we missed the boat when we didn't look at some of the easier form of energy that we could have, alternative energies that we could have used when we started that process with geothermal in 2013. That's my contribution on it, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. And after I heard the Prime Minister spoke and gave that very detailed intervention, I said to myself there was no need for any further debate on this very important issue before this Honourable House. But I wanted just to respond quickly to what the member for Salisbury said. And to say further, Mr. Speaker, that thus far, this administration has followed and pursued this geothermal project with utmost precision. You may recall in the early days, we did a study in the Valley area, Rosa Valley area, to get an idea as to the potential that existed at the time. And that was subsequently followed by the test wells. that gave us an appreciation as to the quality and the extent of the geothermal energy in that particular part of the country. And we did the test wells, and it showed that the energy was very viable and of good quality, a minimum of 7 megawatts per well. We went further to do the reinjection well. So it's a very detailed project that has been done thus far. And the member for Salisbury made reference to many hydro plants, but he has not spoken about and explored the economics of that undertaking. And we have been talking about hydro, and of course, a significant percentage of our energy mix right now is hydro. But we have been talking about hydro potential for a long time now, Mr. Speaker. And as way back of 1975, when Dominica was still a colony. And I want you to just take this house back to the study I'm talking about hydro. And the hydropower study was undertaken and funded by the British government through the services of the North Scotland Hydroelectric Board in May 1975, before some of our members of this honorable house were even born. I don't think the member for the South was born yet. 1975, that's how far back it was. And it was termed, Mr. Speaker, the hydroelectric development in Dominica. The study recommended, Mr. Speaker, at the time I referenced just now, focusing on 5 rivers in Dominica, of the most potentially favorable rivers in Dominica. Lye River, the Blue River in part of my constituency, as Kenfield, Marcus River, the White River, and Checkhorn, again in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. And based on the finding and analysis of those 5 rivers, Mr. Speaker, 3 were found to be worthy of economic prospects. And they were, namely, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, Layu, Makushri, and the White River. Let us just, for one, get an appreciation as to the potential at the time that existed in the White River, which was said, based on the findings, to have been the most favorable one. 2.5 megawatts. It's one thing to come in the house and speak, but the next thing to do your research. This is the highest house in the land, and we have to be prepared to educate the public. 2.5 megawatts. And at the time, the hydraulics of the rivers were different. The speed, etc., were different. So over the years, maybe that the potential can be less. Now, look at that. Now, it's important, how do you therefore get that potential from the river? You have to impound the water by the construction of dams. Significant cost, way overweigh the amount that we're going to actually benefit from by way of spending. And then you cannot get the potential for straight runoff, Mr. Speaker. You're an engineer. You have to impound the river, significant cost. So we are talking the potential in White River from 1975 to 2.5 megawatts. And the study said it made no economic sense then. Now, when you take into context, from one well in the valley, when we did the test years ago, you're talking about 10 megawatts. Now, the other issue, he made reference to wind and hydro. That's cool. We, of course, have put in place a regime of concessions for persons who want to invest in hydro and in wind. And I'm going to go solar myself at my home. But we are talking about those potential that are intermittent. So when you're talking about providing energy on a sustained basis to attract energy-intensive companies that the Prime Minister referenced to, you will need a reliable energy supply that is cheaper. We did a detailed study that told us that if we were to build a domestic plant of 7 to 10 megawatts, the significant reduction we're going to have in the cost of energy. That is why we're pursuing that. And then there are more benefit to be had when you go further to export that resource to our neighbors in Guadeloupe and Martinique. But we have to start first by constructing a domestic plant to supply our local needs and to bring down the cost of energy for us in Dominica. That is a game changer. And I want, therefore, the members on the other side to support this measure before this honorable House, and not to prolong a discussion about things we have spoken about before. So, Mr. Speaker, I just stood there to support this motion and to say that this government again is on the right track, and geothermal is a game changer for us in Dominica. I thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, the debate in the House on matters before the House is not necessarily controversy. A bill is presented and there is an opportunity for debate, meaning we talk with one another. And there are some legitimate questions to be asked. When matters like this come before the House, we take the opportunity to understand clearly where we are with the projects that have been undertaken in the public interest. That's who we serve, the public of Dominica. And for years in Dominica, we have heard and we know that the cost of electricity is high. We know that this relationship we have with fossil fuels is not good, even for our goal of becoming the first climate resilient country in the world, etc. So we know all that. And for years, we have been asking ourselves about interventions that will drive the cost of electricity down and reduce our carbon footprint. These are noble goals. The people of Dominica have heard that. They're very anxious out there about the cost of energy coming down. And so, there is a desire to hear with clarity from the government just where we are on this geothermal project, for example, that so much has been invested in over the years. Because right now, when we look back through the years, this story of exporting geothermal energy to neighboring countries of Guadeloupe and Martinique is an old story. No, it's not new. It didn't emerge yesterday. What have we done with it? Well, we said we were going to do it, and then we said, okay, no, well, before we export, we need a domestic plant, and so we're going to do that now. When we came here last year for the budget, $122 million was approved as the price tag for this geothermal domestic plant. We're going to spend the price tag on it for years now has been $122 million. Up to 2016, 2017, we spent $1.3 million. We spent another $8.2 million the following year, then another $6.1 million in 2018, 2019. This year, we're proposing to spend $36.2 million. While we're doing all that, the people want to know, where are we? How close are we coming to fruition when they will see the benefits of this reduced... Mr. Speaker, I need protection. I am being attacked.
Yes, the member is on his feet. The member, so yes, the member is on his feet.
I am being attacked for addressing the issues before us without fear, favor, affection, or ill will, and for pursuing my constitutional responsibility in this House to honor and preserve the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica, so help me God. So, Mr. Speaker, what I was saying is that in this House, we have a spending plan. We have a spending plan against the project, the $122 million project. So, hopefully, by 2021, 2022, when we spend the $25 million, and the year before that when we spend the $45.2 million, we will have the plant up and running. That's the plan, right? Mr. Speaker, I want you to take note, of the numerous occasions on which the term election is being injected into our conversations here, which supposedly have nothing to do with election, but every time you talk election, election, election. Oh yeah? You have an election next year? After the court case? You have an election after the court case next year? Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. After we have completed the spending of the $122 million in 2021-2022, the promise is, the expectation is that we're going to have this plant up and running, and then finally we will see the benefits of reduced cost of electricity and lower carbon footprint and so on for the people of Dominica. The loan today that we are approving there is on very good terms. So you will notice, oh my God. Oh, really? Really now? Huh? First time? Amazing. And the grant component of this is in the region of $58.6 million. Now, I made an observation yesterday about how well or how not so well the other side have been doing with the collection of grants. I'm wishing you success with this one because it is an important undertaking. And I've heard that from the contacts you've had with the international, the multilateral aid institutions, especially those who are climate friendly and so on, it seems as though you will get this money. So, you know, I'm standing here on behalf of the people of Dominica who have been anxious about this benefit of lower energy costs. Because lower energy costs not only is going to take down our light bills at home, it is going to make the cost of doing business in Dominica easier. It's going to reduce the cost of doing business, and it will allow us to attract and be able to sustain more productive investments in the economy. That is why we're anxious about it. So that's why when you come here to talk about it and we raise these issues, you're not raising them in controversy, because that is the path that you have selected. We might have done differently. We might have made some more investments in solar and wind and hydro, but this is your strategy. And to the extent that you believe in it and it's going to deliver for the people of Dominica, we support it. But we need to be sure that with all the promises being made to the people of Dominica, the implementation plan is working and it is going to deliver, because so far all we have heard with this geothermal is year after year, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. Not one light bulb powered up till now from that. No, no, but you're doing stuff. Yes, fine, you're doing stuff. The people are hearing, yes, you're doing stuff. But you know what is in the back of the mind? Well, when my light bill is going to come down, and we hope when it comes to 2022, we don't come to a situation where the reduced cost of generating the power now gets tied up into the pass-over company, and we see higher profits or surpluses in the company, in the intermediary company, that hampers or reduces the benefit to the end consumer, because we have seen those things before. And I have to say, I've heard it mentioned in the context of this debate that under the United Workers' Party in government, Domlec was sold. Well, if you accept that fact, if you accept that as truth and fact, also accept as truth and fact that since the time you have been in government, since the time you've been in government, the ownership of Domlec changed from one private player to another, and you sat by and did nothing about state owning it, which is what you said is a wonderful thing to do, and you said it again today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In its execution, its implementation. And clearly, it's a project that the government
would have been seeking to get maximum assistance from outside players. The Prime Minister and the presenter of the bill told us this morning that getting people to buy into the initial phases of that project is challenging because of the risks entailed in it. Because you drill, you get or you don't get. You're working really with an unknown. And many investors would like you to discover what is known before they can decide to make their investments in that particular project. And so it was necessary to bring in as many international players as possible to give you the credibility and the latitude that you require if you're going to make a firm and a right decision. The juice really is in the international plant, in the big export plant. But even then, you had to go the route of the smaller plant to check the viability and the productivity of the wells and of the system and of the resource. So we believe that, and I'm saying this in response to the issues raised by the leader of the opposition on the length of time that this project is in gestation phase. But it was necessary. And you know, with these World Banks and the EU, they have their own procurement rules and their own procurement procedures. But it's necessary to have them on board with you. Because if they're with you, then it gives you an international framework within which to work and within which to get other countries involved and other investors involved in investing in that particular project. And I must say so far, we have in fact been successful, and that is why we continue to make progress. So sometimes the delay and the slowness is not always on our part. It could be on the part of the partners that you're working with. And we have already stressed the importance of those partners. And so, yes, we would like it to have happened 3 years ago. This thing has been in the air for 10, 15, 20 years. We've been talking about geothermal development in Dominica. But raising the financing for it, that's what the challenge is. And the Prime Minister has just thanked all the countries. And almost half of the world is on board with us now in that geothermal energy project. So that really is a lot of security and goodwill we have going forward in the implementation and in the execution of that project. And what we're saying is this probably is the final hurdle, we hope. You never know with this guy go to sleep tonight and they wake up with a new perspective tomorrow and you have to dance to it. But we're hoping that this is the final hurdle. We need to jump over so everything will just be consummated into one pot, and we can see an acceleration of the process that we believe that will be required, and like the leader of the opposition said, that the whole country is looking forward. Although I've heard different views from the opposition on the geothermal project, where you should go instead, go solar instead, go windmill instead, and so on. But it seemed to me that we're now agreeing that they have accepted the path that this government has agreed to take with expert advice on all the issues, because we have been examining all the different forms of renewable energy that we produce here in this country. And we took the path of going down the geothermal route. And it seemed to be nationally accepted, and regionally too, because many countries are now pursuing their own geothermal development plans, even when we're way advanced of them. And some of them have gone ahead and made errors in the process because they didn't want to take the time and to go through this thing in a well thought of manner. So I believe that at that stage, I believe we're in a very, very good place. And I believe sooner rather than later, we'll begin to see this project unfolding in its entirety, and the benefits will be brought on to the people of Dominica. And I must use this opportunity to thank Honorable Dr. Vince Anderson for his sterling efforts in marshalling and to bring into the attention of the world our intentions, our plans, and our programs, and sourcing the right connections, which we have done through the various financial institutions and international partners, instead of bringing this project to where we are right now. But just to say, Mr. Speaker, while we look at the tangibles that can be derived from this project, we're looking also at the intangibles, because here it is that we have proclaimed to the world that we will be the first climate resilient country in the world. And we believe that apart from just the ease of doing business, cheaper energy and all the benefits that brings, but we believe that the reputation that Dominica can bring onto itself across the world, that we now go in renewable energy and what that does for our environment. And having come from the devastation of Maria, which some people think it was as a result of climate change issues, which was brought on into large measure by the use of fossil fuel all over the world and how it destroys and I'm sure that my friend here would be able to give us a whole lecture on what this does to the ozone layer and the warming of the oceans and the breaking up of the ice and the rising sea levels and so on as a result of man's interference in the process. In the process, we believe that one of the ways in reducing, you don't agree, Masley? You agree or you do not agree? Anyway, and one of the ways in reducing that impact is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel. And so we believe that if we can send that signal to the international community, here it is, you have a country who a couple of years ago was Erica, now it's Maria, and this country is moving ahead to signal to the world our intention to do something about the impact of climate change, not only on Dominica, but on the world. I believe that would give us tremendous boost in the international community and therefore may just be able to bring to this country many more people who want to see what this small country is doing. And we have signaled during the campaign and even in our manifesto and in the composition of the portfolios, the blue economy and the green economy, we have signaled a shift in how we want to move the economy. The new ways in which we can do the economy, moving slightly away from the traditional forms. We will still have the traditional forms, but we're looking for new areas and new avenues. And that's why we invest in so heavily in the whole plants, in the five-star hotels, because we're looking to create a new economy in the country. And we believe that our exploits in geothermal energy, if successful, can assist us in redirecting and reshaping our economic fortunes. And so we believe, yes, it's a little slow, but I think we should exercise some patience, and we should have some patience and let the process unfold. Because we only have one shot at this. Just one shot we have at it. And if we fail, then we're not sure when we're going to get another opportunity to go down that road again. So I prefer to err on the side of caution, to ensure that yes, we want it quickly, yes, we want it now, yes, we want it fast, but we must be careful that in going down that road, we do not make too many errors, that we turn investors away, that we lose the confidence of our financiers, that we lose the confidence of our partners, and so we make a mess of the whole process. So yes, I agree, it should have been done, we should have been further ahead, but like I say, it's not just all to our fault why we're not further ahead, but we still have to be careful that we don't push ourselves further back by making too many errors along the path. And so we prefer to deal with the advice of our partners, our engineers, and all those countries who have shown some goodwill in assisting us in that process. We're prepared to spend some time with them and to make sure that we get it right. So with just this brief intervention, Mr. Speaker, I want to add my support and to give full support to the measure now before this Honorable House. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, as I wind up the debate on the motion before us, I too would like to extend my congratulations to you and to Senator Phillip as Deputy Speaker and Speaker of this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to express my thanks to the people of Wesley, Woodford Hill, and Palm Tree for the trust and confidence that they have placed in me and elected me as their parliamentary representative. Mr. Speaker, it is important that this Honorable House take note that it is the first time in 30 years that the opposition does not have a representative from the Wesley constituency in this Honorable House. It would mean, Mr. Speaker, that they too have confidence in the representation that I will bring to the Wesley constituency. Mr. Speaker, the member for Marigot, he stated that the people want to know. The Dominica Geothermal Development Company has been open for 2 years, 7 months, and 11 days. Part of the requirements under the World Bank, we needed to have an office that was properly signed, and there's a grievance mechanism in place if you have any issues. Mr. Speaker, I have worked with that company for 2.5 years before entering into active politics. Mr. Speaker, I can report to this Honorable House that no member of the opposition visited the office during that time. So when they come to this Honorable House and say the people want to know, Mr. Speaker, this is not the case because they are not interested in the development of this country. Mr. Speaker, I would like to end on a note of gratitude. I would like to express my thanks to the Honorable Prime Minister for his vision in leading this geothermal project. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to recognize the efforts of Dr. Vince Henderson for his work on the geothermal project. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to recognize the former Minister for Energy, the member for Portsmouth, the former PS in the Ministry of Energy, PS Burton, the Cabinet Secretary, the Financial Secretary. Mr. Speaker, these individuals have worked to see this project come to light. Mr. Speaker, the Dominica Geothermal Company is governed by a board of directors. I too would like to express my thanks to the gentlemen on this board for the work that they have done in steering this company thus far. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to express thanks to the project manager who is from New Zealand as part of a package of aid from the government of New Zealand. Also, I would like to recognize and thank the efforts of the administrative and safeguards manager, the engineers, the community liaison officer who is also from the village of Trafalgar, Mr. Speaker, sorry. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to express thanks to the former parliamentary representative of the Roseau Valley constituency for his work and efforts thus far. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to say thanks to the people of the Roseau Valley, the communities of Trafalgar, Wharton Waven, and Loda, for their patience and understanding in this process. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank all the players who have been involved thus far in the development of the geothermal industry. And I would like to close this motion, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sorry.
This concludes the debate on the motion. I will now put the question. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3(1) of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, amended by Section 4 of the Loans Act Number 4 of 1996, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of loan a sum not exceeding 12,300,000 special drawing rights, or 17,200,000 United States dollars, equivalent to 46,440,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars, from International Development Association on the following terms: service charge, 0.75% per annum; commitment charge, half of 1% per annum; repayment, 60 semi-annual payments commencing May 15, 2030. Grace period, 10 years. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The motion has been approved.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the authorization for credit facility from the International Development Association for funding of the OECS Regional Health Project. Whereas by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, amended by Section 4 of the Loans Act Number 4 of 1996, the House of Assembly may by resolution duly passed authorize the Minister responsible for finance to borrow money from approved sources for the purpose of financing general development purposes in any foreign currency or currencies. And whereas a sum not exceeding $2,200,000 special drawing rights or $3 million United States dollars, equivalent to $8,100,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars, is required to fund the OECS Regional Health Project. And whereas the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica and the International Development Association have agreed to enter into an agreement whereby the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica will contract a loan facility in the sum of $2,200,000 special drawing rights or $3 million United States dollars, equivalent to $8,100,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, amended by Section 4 of the Loans Act Number 4 of 1996, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of loan a sum not exceeding $2,200,000 special drawing rights or $3 million United States dollars, equivalent to $8,100,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars from International Development Association on the following terms. Service charge, 0.75% per annum. Commitment charge, 0.5% per annum. Repayment, 60 semi-annual payments commencing February 15, 2030. Grace period, 10 years.
Seconded, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is before the House for... Oops. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Mr. Speaker, as part of the portfolio of projects approved by the World Bank post-Hurricane Maria, the World Bank is proposing support to the health sector and a credit facility for the implementation of some specific interventions in that sector. In that regard, Dominica was invited to participate in the OECS Regional Health Project. The objective of the project is to improve preparedness capacities of health systems for public health emergencies in the OECS region. The project is intended to build resilience and mitigate cross-border transmission of disease outbreaks and disruptions in the aftermath of an extreme weather event and due to climate change impacts. It also responds to the demand for financial support as regards preparedness for public health emergencies. It is expected to enhance the capacity in Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines to adapt to and to mitigate climate change and also have spillover benefits across the OECS region. Mr. Speaker, it is always anticipated that in the aftermath of a major disaster such as that which was caused by Hurricane Maria, that there will be an outbreak of major diseases. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, with God's help, and by virtue of the fact that we moved quickly to clean up the country after the storm, as well as to restore basic health services in the reasonable quick time, Dominica suffered no major medical emergencies as a result of Hurricane Maria. This is a major achievement, Mr. Speaker. However, there are a number of lessons which were learned. This project allows us to address some of these, and thus would put us in a better position to respond if we were to be affected by a major disaster in the future. Mr. Speaker, this project has 4 parts. Part 1 focuses on improving health facilities and laboratory capacity. At the national level, this will include upgrading of selective health facilities, improving their resilience to climate change and extreme weather conditions through climate-resilient and energy-efficient structural improvements, roofing, electrical safety, improvement in lighting, telecommunications, plumbing and water storage, as well as the inclusion of ramps to facilitate access for people who are physically challenged. It will also include the expansion of laboratory services, including provision of equipment and reagents. Part 2 of the project deals with strengthening public health surveillance and emergency management. This will include strengthening public health preparedness, including surveillance and emergency response, through improvement of national and regional capacities and promotion of cross-border collaboration. Support will also be provided for vector control programs and, when applicable, food safety programs. Mr. Speaker, Part 3 addresses actions for institutional capacity building, project management and coordination. Technical assistance will be provided for contract management, procurement, financial management, environmental and social safeguards, construction supervision, monitoring, and evaluation, including audits for the respective parts of the project. The contingent emergency response component is part 4 of the project. In the event of a major disaster occurring during the life of the project, funds may be reallocated to treat the emergencies that may be created by that disaster. As part of this project, Dominica will be provided with a sum of $2,200,000 special drawing rights, or $3 million United States dollars, equivalent to $8,100,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars. The funds are provided on the following terms: service charge 0.75% per annum, commitment charge 0.5% per annum, repayment 60 semi-annual payments commencing February 15, 2030. Grace period 10 years. Mr. Speaker, I submit the resolution for the authorization of a credit facility from the International Development Association for funding of the National Health Project for the consideration of the Honorable House.
The motion is before the House for debate.
Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the terms of the facility being brought before the House today and listen carefully to the Minister for Health. It's clear to me that that's something that I, as Paragraph 4 would support. Service charge 0.75% per annum, commitment charge 0.5% per annum, repayment 60 semi-annual payments, and a grace period of 10 years. I recall after Hurricane Maria, we had a spike in respiratory ailments, and that would be expected. I personally suffered, from respiratory ailments. I just have one appeal to the Minister of Health. In Dominica, as far as I know, we only have one ENT, who is Dr. Pascal. I'm hoping that you would consider, bringing on Dr. Pascal to service the needs of Dominicans as he is of service to the rest of the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion, the resolution placed before the Honorable House by our Minister for Health. But before I do so, I want to take the opportunity to thank the people of St. Joseph for giving me the opportunity to serve them. I also want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for giving me the opportunity to serve our vulnerable people by giving me the Ministry for Youth at Risk, Dominicans with Disabilities, and Senior Citizens. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member for the Roseau North seems to think that an ENT is an expert in respiratory illness. I beg to differ. And I beg to differ because as a medical doctor by profession, I am aware of who is responsible for respiratory illness. Mr. Speaker, I was employed as a consultant specialist in internal medicine at the time that Hurricane Maria affected this country. And I was one of the few internists responsible for people with respiratory illnesses. There was no spike. Thank God, we could have had spikes, but God protected this nation, and there was no spike. I was there front and center to observe how we were not very prepared for this disaster. We were unable to do a simple test as a complete blood count during that time because our laboratory was affected. This is why I am in full support that we, in this House, approve this resolution to help us to be better prepared in the event of another disaster. I was front and center to see our people suffer. There were people on the ground line, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the Labour Party government for their vision and foresight for creating a resilient hospital in the name of Dominica China Friendship Hospital that can withstand such storms. I also want to take this time to say a special thank you to the People's Republic of China for being our friend over these years, not only in providing technical assistance, but in also providing us with various specialists at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, so we could have the specialties that some of our local doctors are unable to provide. For example, our cardiologists, our urologists, our ophthalmologists. Thank you to these doctors from the People's Republic of China. Today, I stand in support with my government, the Dominican Labour government, for the vision and foresight that over the years that they have provided in bringing this island forward. I am especially thank you to our medical professionals, our previous Health Minister, Dr. Daru, and now our President, Dr. McIntyre, who has been working hard with the outbreak of the coronavirus to ensure that we in Dominica are protected. I won't speak long. I don't speak very long. I just like to make my points very straight. I also want to thank the honorable member for Roseau North, because this week we'll be celebrating our centenarian from the Roseau North community, and he has identified this lady and has requested from my ministry that we identify her and recognize her and provide all the benefits that this government has put in place for the people who are lucky enough or fortunate enough to reach 100 years. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, just short intervention, Mr. Speaker. Anything to do for our nation's health, we will give support to it on the side because it's important. Your health is your wealth. If you have a healthy nation, you have a wealthy nation. And this project, the OECS Regional Health Project, is to improve the resilience of health facilities, and as the Minister of Health outlined earlier on. But we have to look, as we move forward in terms of getting this funding, we will have to look at our health facilities around Dominica. And I know we have some concerns. He made mention of it. I just want us to look at some of the areas, critical areas, that we have been lacking over the years. And it is across the board around the OECS. And I just want to encourage us to look at best practices and start from the bottom up. Sometimes you go to the different communities, the nurses who work in primary health care in the different communities can tell you of the challenges. Work with them, not go bring things down to them. I think we will have a better understanding and get better results of if our healthcare by including them in the process. We are hearing some of the concerns that they are having and why some of them are leaving. We have to sit down with them and chat with them and see where we can work together. Or you call it effective networking, that we can work together to move to ensure that we develop our health care program in Dominica, not only from the OECS perspective, but look at it from how unique it is in Dominica. In Portsmouth, we have the hospital. What it needs to do in that hospital to ensure that the people in the northern end of Dominica do not have to, if you have some emergencies, logistics is difficult, that they can stay in Portsmouth and be taken care of. In the northeast, in the south, in Granby, you might have some, for example, after Maria, we had difficulties with our road network. In Peachland, you could come to town. If we can develop these facilities in that direction in terms of resilience, in terms of providing the type of services that we need. Our health system right now has a serious problem, and we have to continue to work hard to develop it, to work hard, and we are in full support on this side, but we want to ensure that we look at everything across the board that will not only take what St. Lucia has or St. Vincent has, but what is unique to Dominica, our terrain, our infrastructure and everything, to make sure that the funds that we are taking will be money well spent. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Your mic is on.
Put on your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question of preparedness for health emergencies and issues like improving the health facilities and laboratory services, the climate resilient construction for these facilities and so on, being able to strengthen the public health surveillance and so on, all of these are very important issues. So we welcome the initiative, and the monies, again, under the loan arrangement, a very favorable loan arrangement. I'm asking, though, and don't get upset about questions, because these are just questions. We want clarity. Is this $8.1 million now, is this part of the funding for the ongoing initiative building 11 health clinics around Dominica? That's a separate thing. So separate and apart from the 11 health clinics that we're building around Dominica, we have $8.1 million. We have $8.1 million that is going to go into improvement of health facilities and laboratory services, strengthening public health surveillance, institutional capacity building, and so on. So, Mr. Minister, through you, Speaker, we wish you well with the effective implementation of these projects and the effective utilization of the loan facilities. I picked up on a lesson that was being presented to this Parliament yesterday on the question of multiplier effects. And if I think I remember the formula well, this, based on what the $32 million would have meant from the Rapid Response Social Recovery Agency, it would have grown and multiplied to $104 million, I heard. By that same formula, the $8.1 million will probably multiply into about $26.3 million, multiply in effect. So I thank the presenter of that particular formula for that, and to ask the Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that Dominicans with the capability to participate in the provision of these services, construction and so on, are able to tender, to bid, and to get an opportunity to benefit from this piece of the growth as well, because after all, $8.1 million is a loan. We're going to have to pay it back. The terms are favorable. We don't start paying it back for 10 years, but it's a loan. We have to pay it back. And so we must ensure that as much as of that money as possible stays with the people of Dominica and multiplies on that economic multiplier effect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a very short intervention in respect to the motion which is before this House and which was ably presented by the Honourable Minister for Health. That is, Mr. Speaker, in respect to a loan facility of $8,100,000 from the International Development Association on extraordinary terms and conditions. We have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that if everything, especially with health services and the progress which you have made, that is to say individual people have made in society, and the dynamism of health and the health system, you'll always have challenges. Because the more affluent you get, the less you believe that you have to go to primary healthcare facilities. So people get pregnant, they don't go to register themselves at the health center, they go to a private doctor. And the private doctor goes to the hospital and deals with the delivery. And this is an issue, I believe, that through education, we need to inform the nation that we have to place less stress on the secondary and tertiary institutions and take greater advantage of primary health care. Not only in respect to treating with any ailment which somebody may have, but also getting education on how to prevent certain diseases. We cannot contest the fact, Mr. Speaker, that in Dominica, we have had some very, very, very hard-working nurses and health professionals. And oftentimes, we criticize the system as we see it, or as we believe to see it, and not recognizing that we are chipping away from the commitment and the hard work which nurses and doctors give to us in this country for our population. I mean, I grew up, I was raised by a nurse. And I mean, there are times at 3 o'clock in the morning, people would knock our doors. They want to see the nurse. 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think that while we may always have challenges, we may need to find a different way of channeling our concerns about those challenges so that we can work together to addressing them. And move away from the finger pointing, which often is the case when we're discussing these things. I happen to have gone to the hospital the morning after the hurricane. The morning after the hurricane, very early. And I saw nurses, not only seeking to get the patients and carrying patients physically to areas there were no leaks, but also engaging in maintenance at the time. And we have our now permanent secretary who was a matron at the time, and I met her there. I mean, and I believe a nurse Prosper, if I remember the name, and the other nurses. I mean, these are people whom we have to give the highest regard and commendation. And sometimes too, we ourselves as citizens, we go to the hospitals and health clinics and we want to get served first. And we use that as a basis to criticize the system. Oh, the system slow, the system this. But in many developed countries, you won't get care until you can present your insurance card. No. And so, all of these funds that we invest in the health is to seek to improve, to address issues that we identify as a nation, as both providers of care and receivers of care, so that we can continue to try to be ahead of the challenges. And it requires us working together. So we have about 12 health centers to construct. Many of them have started in Portsmouth, in Marigot, in Wesley, in Penville, Vickers, Maho, Bacatel, Bellevue-Chopin. We are going to acquire the lands in Colliho, and I don't want to mention who we'll be acquiring from, but we have to engage that person. But I believe that we cannot have the people of Colliho in that situation, and there are lands that are available. Yeah. You know, we're not going to go to heaven with our land, worldly possessions. We have to address this issue in Colliho and once and for all, because Colliho is a highly vulnerable community. And we have the funds to build the health center, and we have to take a decisive action on this. And so I'll be meeting this landowner very soon myself to say to the landowner that we have to acquire the land, because we cannot keep making a draft in Colliho and the Colliho people believing that the government is taking them for a ride. I think the government has to bring the guillotine down on this and take a decisive decision on this and look at the greater interests of the residents of Colliho. And I am with them and only proud in respect of that particular situation. Ansdime, I believe we have addressed the issue of the location. We're moving at this. Once we deal with the administrative aspect of it, we'll start Ansdime. Newtown, we are addressing the issue of the location for this new health center. And Portsmouth has started, well on its way, being built by a local contractor. And I must commend him because of the professional way in which he's conducting himself. And I have been told that he will be getting additional contracts based on how he has been able to carry out the existing contract there. And of course, in Roseau Central, we were going to retrofit the Roseau Infant School, but that facility was not built for a health center. So we tried to knock two walls inside there and put it over it. Billy and myself had a discussion, and we both agreed that we should move towards the construction of a new health center for Roseau Central to provide health care to the city of Roseau. We had to go to the infant school for reasons known to most people, but it's been a while. And I have been there a few times, and the nurses have complained to me, the doctors have complained to me, the patients have complained to me, and I've complained to myself as well. You know, that we really cannot continue to have it there, and we'll be dealing with this matter in a systematic way. The Marigot Hospital, as you know, we have started. This is an extraordinary facility. I believe by working together, we can turn this facility into a truly, it is a national project. It's a national project which will provide a number of benefits, number of services to our people, Mr. Speaker. And sometimes, well, whether it's 6 years or 10 years, but the fact is it is being built, and thank God for that. It is being built. It is being built. It's being built. There are some people, Mr. Speaker, who pretend to want things. And when they're getting it, they pretend they're not getting it. They pretend it's not happening, Mr. Speaker. And so we remain in focus. Our commitment was always the case, and we have found a better financing solution to this, which has allowed us now to fast forward the commencement of construction of this facility, and that's what we have done. The Portsmouth Hospital has to be redeveloped, relooked, because it is limited in capacity. It was built at a particular time, and there are certain things that we want to take into consideration, and so we have to address the issue of the Portsmouth Hospital, and this is part of our plan. It is written. That's part of our plan. We are going to be working, and the minister will mention these things, but we're going to be working with the Cuban government again, as we did in the past, with the training of our nurses. Some years ago, when we had a challenge with nurses, we brought in the Cubans, and they started with training about 100 nurses at the time. And I believe we eventually ended up with about 80-something who graduated under this training program. And so to increase the number of nurses in a quick order, we have re-engaged the Cuban government, and they've agreed to provide us with the professors who will complement our local educators to assist us in the training of nurses No, uncle. No, I talk about the health, uncle. There. Health. Building resilience, training of nurses, training of health professionals. That's what improving the management of and the delivery of healthcare services. That's what the loan is going for. That's what the loan speaks to. Yeah. You don't read anything, you know. You don't read. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. No, this is what it's for. But you asked a question whether the $8.1 million is part of the health center being built. I've explained to you. So, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of exciting things happening in health.
Yes.
And we have more Dominicans who are specialists, I believe, than any other time in our history. And this is important because the greater proportion of our health services are being managed and delivered by Dominican-born people. And I think that is a progressive step. That's a progressive step which we've taken. And all of them very young people who are really committed to national development. And they've been working diligently in this. I commend them for their services to our country. And so I support this measure. We've agreed to partner with the World Bank on this because it fits to our national health plan. It fits into where we want the health services to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And this is why we have agreed to participate in this. And there are some things that we have included in the negotiations with them that were not originally part of the understanding. And they have given us a commitment that they will certainly engage us on that. So, and of course, the Dominico-China Friendship Hospital is under construction. We are seeking to improve on the delivery of existing services, and we've also introducing new services to our citizens. And you know, when we talk about these new services for people ask about, well, what you mean, that's Dominica, why you need all these things in Dominica? When you don't have it, they say, why didn't you have it? When you bring it in, they say, well, little Dominica, that's so expensive for you to have. Because the goal there, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure as far as practically possible, and we will never be able to have the full gamut of all of the health services that the country would certainly be able to afford. We don't have the money for it, and we're not able to have all of it. But that which we have, we must ensure that we deliver the services at the optimal level, that there is an appreciation that we're dealing with human beings, and understanding that how we speak to them will determine how they react to that which we're proposing. So we're not saying that it is a perfect system, but we're saying that there are efforts and there are tangible efforts towards improving the delivery of health services. Because notwithstanding the fact that some of us may have health insurance, before the ambulance comes to pick you up, you'll have to go to the hospital. And we want to ensure that all of us, that when we go there, we can get the care which all of us deserve, irrespective of who you are, or irrespective of your status or your standing in society. But always preoccupied with those who are less fortunate, those who do not have the means of paying for the care when it is available to them, and that has to continue to be our preoccupation. So let us move with haste with this. The member for Marigot spoke about contracts. You know, sometimes they talk about procurement and tendering, and other times they talk about handing over contracts to people. So, you see what I'm saying? Which is it? Which is it? That's what we're doing. And if you go for a transparent process to selecting a contractor and somebody gets it, we have to respect that. Because Dominica is not an island unto its own. And there are countries that are qualified under the rules of the World Bank to tender for any project. But you have to meet certain minimum requirements. So it's not because you say you're a contractor that alone qualifies you to get a contract. There are times you need to put, for example, a financial bond in the bank, or a certain percentage of the contractual sum. In the event that there are contractual defects, that the clients can go and access this bond to rectify the problems. And so the question is that we may need to have a conversation as to how do we get some of our people to get to this level. And this is what we try to do by providing contracts to local people to get them to have the CV, the resume, that will have the number of projects they've had and the financial contractual sums of this, so that when they are tendering for projects on the World Bank and the CDB and the European Union, they can show their financial standing, because these are things that are required and so on. So when we ask the question, or we make a statement, especially when we're making a statement, then we must get the facts of it, and to know from what basis we're making those statements. So, Mr. Speaker, with this very short intervention, I really want to place my support and to commend the leadership of the Minister for Health. The Minister for Health, though he is a medical doctor himself, but he speaks like he has been the Minister of Health for the last 25 years. And I think part of the Minister of Health's ability to address this issue also has to do with his own understanding and appreciation for people. And so, following on from Dr. Daru and now with Dr. Irvin McIntyre, the Minister for Health, I believe that with his leadership, we can certainly, and once all of the health professionals work with him in tandem, I believe we can really transform for the greater good of our citizens, the health system and the delivery of health care in our country. But at the end of the day, each of us, even here in the Parliament, must determine what is going to be our contribution to this process. And if something good is happening, let us say it's happening, something good happening. If something needs to be improved, let us say what needs to be improved, and how we believe from our own perspective we can rectify this particular challenge to make it function and work better. Because at the end of the day, this is about us. healthcare should really be apolitical. And this is how I always seen it. When people come to me for medical assistance, I don't beat an eye. I don't beat an eye, because for me, healthcare, there should be no politics in it. And that's how we see it, and that's how we must see it as a nation. Because, there's no room for error in this thing. This is not about the construction of a road, or some potholes. This is about life and death in many instances. This is about those who can afford it and those who cannot afford it. And so, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Go ahead. We'll just complete it and then.
Mr. Speaker, before I conclude, let me just add a few words to the discussion. First and foremost, I think it's very, very comforting that both sides of the House have agreed on this point of view here as regards to health. And this is comforting, and I think it's a move in the right direction when we put people's health first, regardless of our positions. And I really appreciate that part very, very much. Secondly, we have to appreciate the fact that the conditions here, the terms of the loan, the facility, very favorable. And that puts us in a better position in terms of what we get, in terms of our value for what we're going to pay for. The whole project here, part one actually deals with how do we handle situations after the emergencies and the disasters. That means we are going to be in a better position to provide the services for our people even after major disasters. And we talk about the roofing and the electrical aspect, the access to ambulance, but there's a part we have to appreciate too, is that the health information system is also part of the Part 1 program, where we can have the interconnections of our health centers, which have been the smarting of these health centers to the central part and our hospital. So all that is included in Part 1, which is really dealing with the infrastructure part, so that we can have emergency health services even after disasters. The Part 2, where this actually relates to where we are now. The situation we have with coronavirus, this is where Part 2 comes in as regards to surveillance and how we deal with these emergencies. So yesterday when I told you that power gave us up till 80%, with these facilities, next time I come back and tell you power gives us up to 90%. This is what this is all about. This is going to take us from 80 most probably to 90. Although we are ahead of many OECD countries, but this is where this facility will help us to even be better prepared to deal with emergencies like what we are having presently. Then apart from that, the Part 4, which talks about the flexibility, because even while this is going on, you might have emergency situations. So we can actually, the financial aspect of this, there's a certain amount of flexibility that funds can be directed if we got an emergency, a situation that we didn't anticipate. So that part is an excellent part of the whole program. But with all of this, what it really does is basically strengthening our primary healthcare system, which is the basis of it. This is what we want to do. If we can strengthen the primary healthcare system, we won't even we'll have much less cases in the secondary and the tertiary situation. We're nipping it in the bud. This is what this is all about. Nipping these situations in the bud so we can have a very excellent primary healthcare system. As a matter of fact, this smarting, it has started already. It was done in La Plaine. It started in Grand Bay. And then we're thinking of doing it in Roseau as well. But as the Prime Minister and I had a discussion, we'd rather have a brand new health center in Roseau than to smart the primary school in Roseau as a health center, which makes much better sense and it's a better investment in terms of value for money spent. But with all of this being said, we have to see that this is a relationship. I keep stressing on that, because we can have all these structures, but we the people have to own them. We have to maintain them, and we have to make use of them. It doesn't make sense we have all these smart health centers, and then we have all these polyclinics, and then we just don't go to them. we have to go to them. We have to get our regular checkup. So the people have their part to play in developing this primary healthcare system that we're talking about. We will build the structures, but yes, you have to own them, you have to be part of them, and you have to attend them regularly so that you can remain healthy. The health center alone wouldn't make you healthy. You have to play your part, and you have to go to the health center. When your appointment is there in 3 months' time, make sure you're there in 3 months' time. This is how health is going to come to a next level, Mr. Speaker. Then also, besides these structures, the staff, I cannot overemphasize more how hard work a lot of our staff are putting into this. And sometimes we might just get the isolated case here and there, and we might think that is all like a representation of all the staff. No, that's not the case. The Permanent Secretary and I, we've been visiting all the health centers all over the country. And sometimes you would visit a health center and the nurse had an anniversary on that particular day. And she tells her patients to come earlier at 6:30 so that she can run the clinic and be over by 10, 11. This is the effort some of these nurses put into it. Rather than to take the day off, or rather than not to turn up, she'll make allowances for those things. And those things we should appreciate. Sometimes you might end up in a certain place, and then yes, when there was supposed to have been a pharmacy, the pharmacy is filled with drugs, and the pharmacist is not there. This is also not the ideal situation. And then you end up in another health center, and even if the pharmacist is not there, then the nurse makes allowances to make sure that the people get their medication. It's all about being compassionate and just making things work. Granted, I'll be the first to admit that circumstances may not be the best all the time. But this is exactly why we have the reclassification. With the reclassification, there's room for upward mobility, and there's also room for better salaries. So this is what we are getting into when we talk about reclassification within the health system, so our nurses can be in a better position to move upwards and get better salaries. So it's all about structures, it's all about staff, and it's all about the people. It's a comprehensive approach. So with this fund here that we're talking about, and the people play their part, the system, the government plays its part, the future will be good for health, Mr. Speaker. This is where this intervention comes in. There are just two things that are constantly changing in today's world. That is the climate and technology. And at the end of this, it is the less fortunate that suffer most of the times. So this is where the smarting of the health centers, which is our reaction to climate change, and the technology we're going to involve in all our health centers and our hospital and the information system. So where we can put this resilience and we put our adjustments with technology, the less fortunate will be in a better position. This is what it's all about, Mr. Speaker, so that the public, our country as a whole, will be much safer and in a much better position. So with this, I think this is an excellent intervention that we've spoken about and we've discussed. Both sides are in agreement, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased that, yes, we can go ahead with such an intervention. Thank you.
This concludes the debate on the motion. I will now put the question. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, amended by Section 4 of the Loans Act Number 4 of 1996, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of loan a sum not exceeding $2,200,000 special drawing rights, or $3 million United States dollars, equivalent to $8,100,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars from International Development Association on the following terms. Service charge, 0.75% per annum. Commitment charge, 0.5% per annum. Repayment, 60 semi-annual payments commencing February 15, 2030. Grace period, 10 years. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The motion has been approved.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be suspended up to 3 p.m. this afternoon. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. House stands suspended to 3 p.m. this afternoon.